Well, hey there, this is Kim Constable. Welcome to the Kim Constable podcast. Nobody cares, work harder. I feel like sometimes inserting a good swear word in there and like slapping the desk at the same time. But anyway, nobody cares, work harder. Nice to see you all. Well, not really seeing you, I'm hearing you, but nice to speak to you all this week. How has your week been? Has it been good? Well, my week has been absolutely wonderful, and it's made even better by the very special guest that I have on my podcast today, who is the absolutely incredible Alex Hormozi. Yes, Alex is the other half of Layla Hormozi, who I interviewed on the podcast a few weeks ago, who you guys absolutely loved. And once I spoke to Layla and I heard her story, and I realized that she was just one half of a power couple, I just knew that I had to get the other half on the podcast. And so Alex Hormozi, let me tell you, does not agree to very many podcast interviews. So I feel massively privileged that he gave me, here, let me tell you, a good 90 minutes of his time to be on this podcast. So I felt extremely privileged to be able to ask him questions. And I think he kind of thought that this was going to be a business podcast. Well, I don't actually know what he thought, but he probably thought I was going to ask him loads of strategy questions. But of course, me being me, I wanted to know, Alex, what was your childhood like? And what made you tick? And why are you the way you are? And we had so much fun on this podcast. And I just know you're going to love him. This is like one of the smartest men I've ever met in my entire life. And let me tell you, I met a lot of smart men, right? And whenever I was researching him and watching some of his videos, I was just like, holy shit, what the hell am I going to ask this guy? Like, what the fuck do you ask the smartest man in the world? Really? Like, what kind of questions do you actually ask him? So, and I kind of got all nervous as well. It was like, oh, I'm feeling a wee bit nervous now. Like, what if I make myself look stupid? What if my questions aren't intelligent enough? Listen, I do not get that way. So it was feeling quite funny. But it was really, really, really fantastic talking to Alex. Oh my God, he shared so much good stuff, so much strategy. Really, you're going to find out in this episode what it actually takes to be successful. And it's not what you think, right? I would say you just need to pull up your big girl pants and get on with it and work harder. Well, Alex had a few other hints and tips and tricks and strategies that he uses to help, people break through their belief structure, their belief, the patterns that they hold in place that stops them from being successful. Loads of really good advice on that, as well as just speaking really candidly about his experiences and what has shaped him into who he is today. And let me tell you something else for free. After the podcast ended, right? He stayed on with me for another 30 minutes and literally mapped out an entire business strategy for me for the Sculpted Vegan for next year. You see, I was like totally blown away, and I am a good soldier. I do what I'm told. So I'm really going to take away, if someone far more successful than me gives me their advice and says, here's what I think you should do. Do you know what I do? I do it. I take the advice. I don't go, well, that sounds really good, but I'm going to do this thing over here. No. That's why I'm successful, because I do what I'm told by someone who knows what they're talking about. So Alex, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for your advice. Truly, I deeply appreciate the fact that you even gave me 30 minutes of your time to give me free business advice that I probably would have had to have paid, 30 minutes of Alex Hormozi's time to advise me on business, maybe $100,000. Alex, I owe you. And I swear to God, whatever you need, I'm here for you. So I'm going to stop waffling on now. You're like, okay, Kim, shut the fuck up. Just get to the good stuff. I'm getting there, I promise, right? But before we get there, I have to tell you this month's podcast winner for November is the beautiful 𝐋𝐈𝐒𝐄𝐍. I'm not sure if that's her real name, but it's a fantastic name. 𝐋𝐈𝐒𝐄𝐍. Thank you so much for your absolutely smashing review. I loved reading it. And if you too would like to win one of our Sculpted Vegan programs, all you got to do is leave me a nice review, not a shitty review, a nice review. Wherever you listen to this podcast, take a screenshot of it, send me the screenshot on Instagram, and my beautiful assistant Christina will choose a wonderful winner. She loves reading all of the things you say on the podcast, and she will choose a wonderful winner, and or a very worthy winner, and we will announce it at the start of January for December's winner. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to go to the podcast interview, and I will chat to you guys again at the end. Alex, literally, we haven't hardly even had a conversation before this podcast started, which is the way I like it. But thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here. I've been looking forward to it since it came on the calendar.
You are probably, I would say, one of the only people on this earth that I have found out is busier than me. Or more productive, actually, I would say, because there's being busy and then there's being productive. But I started following you on Instagram ever since I interviewed your fabulous wife a couple of weeks ago, and started like stalking her and stalking you on Instagram. And I was like, wow, this guy actually, I think, gets more done in a day than I do. And so just for that, I wanted to interview. That makes me sound like I'm blowing myself up, and I don't really mean it to be that way. But you are pretty fabulous. So I'm going to read out a little bit of I'm gonna like embarrass you here and read out a little bit of a bio about you. Is that okay? So everyone knows who you are?
Hopefully it's up to date.
It sounds pretty impressive. Ready? Let's go. You're going to hear all about yourself now. Alex Hormozi is an American entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. I love that word. He scaled 4 companies to, are you ready? $100 million in cumulative sales across 4 different industries, which is software, service, e-commerce, and brick and mortar in under 4 years. Here, tell you what, that's impressive, without taking on any outside capital. He is widely considered an acquisition and monetization expert. He also makes mistakes, which I love, which we're going to talk about more about, and candidly shares his painful lessons with aspiring entrepreneurs to help them avoid his pitfalls. He donates much of his free time to advancing equal access to education and encouraging entrepreneurship in underprivileged communities, which I absolutely and utterly love. But here, Alex, here's how I want to start this, right? So I found out that you were in management consultancy for 2 years in space cyber intelligence. Is that correct?
I was.
Yeah, I bet not many people start your interviews with that little nugget of information.
No, most people don't even know. So.
Well, here's why I was really interested in that, particularly because you've said that, well, I've heard you say in some of the research I was doing about you that you used that model and applied that to gyms. So you applied what you had learned, in management consultancy, and then applied that model whenever you started your own gym. Can you talk us through that a little bit, what that was like, and then how you took that model and transferred it into an industry which is completely unrelated?
Yes. So the management consulting firm that I worked for was a boutique strategy firm. And so we would be essentially hired in to be the smartest people in the room. And that's the words of the partner, not me. I was a 22-year-old who knew nothing at the time. And so she had a specific process. It was really the company's process of becoming smarter than the people who were the experts. And so with information, the hardest thing to do is to find, because there's so much of it now. In the beginning, it was like you just have to consume all the information, then you're done. But now it's sifting through the information so you can find the good stuff that becomes more valuable to skill, which is why consulting continues to grow as a business model, right? And so the process that we would go through is that we would consult experts first. Because experts have already sifted through the vast majority of the data and can point you to the data sources that are going to be the highest quality or the purest, et cetera. And so what we would do was we would first get one introduction to who is widely considered the expert in the field. And we would interview this person, try and find as much as we could about the field. And then after that, and these people are experts, they love talking about the thing that they're experts in, right? And so we'd get tons of information. And then from there, we'd say, hey, can you give us 5 other people you think whose opinions you would value and you think might add more color or depth to this topic? And they would give us 5 people. And then we'd go talk to those 5 people, do the same thing. And then after a certain period of time, you start getting the same names over and over again, or the names become more obscure or more off topic. And at that point, we would kind of conclude the research. Now that would be phase 1. And this would be like the peon's job, which is what I was doing at the time, is I would be the one transcribing and writing down all of this research. And so we'd have 400 pages, 500,000 pages worth of transcriptions. And then from there, the first step or the second step would be to codify them. So I would highlight them based on topics. So I guess the pre-step before that is knowing all the topics and then highlighting the topics. And then I would reassemble them and then I would condense them and eliminate, because there's tons of duplications. A lot of people have the same views on the same things. We'd recondense them. And then from there, we would make a presentation based on now we had just talked to all of these experts. So we had our own inclinations of what we thought would be the best course of action. And then we present that to a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star general in like 60 minutes. And so that entire project might take 6 to 12 months or sometimes years to answer a simple question, which is, and a good friend of mine, Dr. Kashi, says, the shorter the question, the longer the answer. And so like, what is life? It's like, right. And so they might say, we want to find the best way to allocate our force mix, which would be like satellites, missiles, human people, et cetera, against assets so that we can have the least amount of overlap so we can ultimately kill the most people, right? That would be the idea. And so then we would look at all of these different ways of thinking through it, the different departments that would be associated, and then try to reorganize it into something that was manageable for someone to take actions on. And then we would have, the upsell there would be like, and we can help you do the implementation of this plan that we would, have just outlined for you. And so something like that might cost, that 60-minute presentation, we might bill $3 million for as a consultancy. And so that process of consulting with experts and going through these steps is, first, when I was a gym owner, I didn't know anything about it. And I think that was an advantage because I didn't have any preconceived notions. And so I emailed all these gyms and said, hey, can I just hang out with you? And a lot of people said no, but some people said yes. And I would drive 2 hours, I'd drive 6 hours, and I would spend a weekend and I would just ask, well, what do you do after this? And what do you do after this? And a lot of times there was a lot of useless stuff, but every once in a while I would get these nuggets. I was like, that's great. And, week by week, month by month, I started accumulating these tactics and these strategies that would work well in the gym business. And I would implement them. And then step by step, my gyms became more and more profitable. From there, we started doing flying out. And so speed up 3 years. I went from, one location to 6. I started getting people asking me, hey, how can you help me do what you did in your gyms at my gym? And so then I started flying out. This is the moment I met Layla. And this was the idea I pitched her. And I was like, hey, I think I'm going to start this business.
On your first date, I heard.
Yeah, my first date. I was like, you need to quit your job and you should join me. And she was like, I just met you on the internet. And I was like, you're going to do it eventually. So just come. And so anyways, I flew out and I launched 3 gyms with this model. And I called them gym launches because gym turnaround hurts people's egos. So I would go and do gym launches, but I'd fix their pricing, we'd fix their packaging, we'd fix basically the entire model, how they structured their sessions, how they could get more people in per square foot, all that kind of stuff. And I came back and I don't know if she told you the story, but she picked me up from the airport and I had a backpack and I had no clothes. I literally wore the same t-shirt and shorts every day for 90 days. It was disgusting. I was just sitting there.
Inside out, did you?
Oh yeah, I did every trick you could imagine. I would just Febreze and put some alcohol on my face. Yeah. Anyways, but I came back and I said, "Hey, I know I promised you I was going to take you on a date, which I still hadn't taken her on a date yet. We've been talking for 2 or 3 months at this point." And I said, "You just got to do this one favor for me first." She said, "What is it?" And I was like, "You got to process these payments." And so inside my backpack, I had a stack of contracts this thick. Each one of them was a $500 bill. And so I said, "Hey, help me process this." And so I showed her how to process them. And we processed like $130,000 in like 45 minutes. And she was like, "What do you do again?" She was like, "Is it legal?" I was like, "It's legal." And that's when she quit her job. And then she decided to come out and do the next launch with me. But that kind of consultative process of first figure out the experts, apply the things, see what works, and then continue that process. Again, once I had gym launch, which was where I did gym turnarounds, I then started consulting with businesses, which was a more leverageable model. And at that point, I was sharing everything that I knew at that point. But even then, I then had access to this massive distribution network of information. And that became what I believed was going to be our competitive advantage, is that the bigger I grew my network, the more access to data I would have, and the more I could spin this wheel where we would have the sharpest, best information. If I have 2,000 gyms to pull from, my top 1% is the top 20 gyms that have less than 1% churn. And then I would interview all of them as a panel, take all the notes, compile them, document what the actual processes that will repeat against all of them, because everyone does a million things, but the question is, what are the 5 things that matter most? And so then we'd look at that, and then I would productize that information, and then I'd redistribute it through the network, and then we'd watch churn drop across the network. And that was and we'd zero in on one thing. Hey, who has the highest close rates? Who has the highest show rates? Who's got the best lead gen process? Who's got the best referral process? Like each little wheel of growth in the business, we would just apply that process to, and then productize it, and then distribute the training into the network. And that was what built the continuity on the back end, is that they knew that I was always continuing to reinvest in getting more information that I could redistribute to them, so that the gyms that I had, and this is my goal, at least with every business that I work with, is that they should do better than I did, not try and reduplicate. Because where I ended is my gyms never did what our top gyms do. My top gyms capped at like 600 a year. Mm-hmm. The gyms that we have 63 gyms that did over $1 million. And one I think they did over 2. Just a single location as a 2,000 square foot tiny little facility. And so, anyways, they learned from where I was. That was baseline. And then from there, how can we improve the model? So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but that is how I applied the.
I love it, because you've given me, so now I'm like, I'm going to ask this and I'm going to ask this. And now there's so many areas I can go in with, but I love what you said. I'm actually reading a book at the minute by Simon Sinek called No, it's not Simon Sinek. It's Matthew Sid. He has written some incredible books, and I think it's called The Infinity Game. The Infinity Game, I think it's called. And he talks exactly about that. One of the chapters is about borrowing across industries. And so many people just get stuck in the industry and the way that it was done. And I think that I did a similar thing to you with my industry, in that I started studying internet marketing. And I studied internet marketing for 6 years, trying to start and grow an internet business. And I learned everything there was to learn about internet marketing before I finally said, screw this, it's not going to work. And I gave it up, and I went and then I trained as a yoga teacher. And then when I started bodybuilding, I realized, hey, hang on a wee second. There's nobody in the PT business or in the body, because I'm not even a trained PT. People say to me all the time, are you a personal trainer? I go, thank God I'm not, because I might have got stuck in that mindset. But what I did was I took the online marketing model and I applied it to a traditional gym-based model, or traditional training model of what PTs were doing. And I'm the only one in the industry doing what I'm doing. And that's why my company grew so fast, because I borrowed across industries, which it seems is what you did. And that's why I got excited whenever I heard about that. But one thing I would say, Alex, is you seem extremely adept at taking content and turning that content into process. And just the way you were explaining the management consultancy role, taking an enormous amount of data, consolidating that data, and actually then, testing the data to figure out what is the higher level process in it. And it seems that is what you apply to your gyms and to your business model. But what I want to know is, were you always like that? Like, you must have been data driven or data focused in order, you probably learned a lot of the strategies in those 2 years in management consultancy, but what do you think happened in your life to kind of shape you into having that kind of brain? Because that doesn't just come from 2 years post-college. I believe that is built somewhere in childhood. Was there something that happened or something you can identify that turned you into a systems thinker, which is what it appears that you are?
So a couple things. First, the 2 years of management consulting, I didn't really learn any frameworks about business at all. I only learned how to transcribe stuff and do the same process. And so I wouldn't attribute it to that. In terms of like brain and thinking, I think you might find this interesting, but until I was in my 20s, until I started that job, even maybe a year into that job, I actually thought I was very bad at math. And so I used to cheat all the way through high school on every math test and every math homework. I pretty much stopped my formal education in math at like 8th grade. So like algebra. And like after that, I didn't do anything. And so I'm bringing that up because I think that we're really trainable in the amount of beliefs that we have. Like our beliefs about our identity and ourselves influence our skills more than anything. And so at one point I decided I was not going to be bad at math anymore. And my strategy for doing that was that I was not going to use a calculator anymore. That was the action. And then from that point going forward, I never used a calculator, and I made a lot of mistakes, but then I started to get better and better and better. And now I can do lots of math in my head that people find cool. Mm-hmm. And so I'm only illustrating that story in order to say, I think we all have these kind of unlocked skills inside of us and sometimes having these beliefs around them. But in terms of a singular event that happened that caused me to think in frameworks, I don't know. I think the way I say it is that like, I'm not smart enough to remember things if I don't have a visual or it has to be organized some way or I'll forget it. And so I think I'm really absent-minded. And so I have to make these things so I can remember them. A mentor once told me, it's like, you have to make these artifacts. And so if you go through an experience, you have to make an artifact of it. So it crystallizes the knowledge and the experience is something that you can take with you. And so I kind of like that thinking about it.
It sounds like a very inductive style of learning. I was similar growing up in terms of I'm very auditory digital. I don't know if you've ever done any NLP, but that was all I remember from NLP. It was either your visual, auditory digital, or auditory tonal or kinesthetic. Yeah. I'm very auditory digital. I'm the kind of person who'll send you an email which will say, please see attached. That's it. If you give me like a graph or a pie chart, I will shoot you. Like if anyone in my company knows, never present data to me with color or graphs or pie charts. Just give me the black and white data. That's how I interpret data. And so, but I had a question somewhere in here, but I think that whenever I was younger, I detested school. Like I hated being told what to do. I hated being controlled. I hated being forced to sit in a classroom and learn. I'm a very inductive learner. I'm like, give me the thing and let me break it and take it apart and look at it and figure shit out. And then I'll put it back together again so that I can understand how it works inductively in my body. But what kind of a childhood did you have? What were your, if you don't mind me asking, I love to figure out what makes people tick and why they why they are the way they are. Like that's what really kind of interests me on this podcast. So what kind of an upbringing did you have? Was it a traditional upbringing, or was there some kind of juicy trauma you can share with us?
Yeah. I don't think that, so, what's unfortunate is that my upbringing, I think traditional is now broken, if that makes sense. I think most people have traumatic childhoods, and I think that's mostly because we are children in an adult world. And so we have the coping mechanisms of children. And so for us to leave 8 years unscathed is unlikely, right? And so I don't think that my trauma is any worse than anyone else's, because I think everyone registers a 10 out of 10 pain the same way. And so whether that means that your father raped you your whole life, versus I knew a girl who had a very wholesome upbringing, and she told me the most traumatic event was when her father slammed his hand on the table and told all the children to shut up. And I was like, that is the worst thing that happened in your childhood. And so, but it was just as traumatic, arguably, and anybody can make their counter argument, but I think people can only register a certain amount of pain. And so I think what happens is your pain odometer gets calibrated, but a 10 is still a 10. And so I don't say this to toot any horns. With that, context or preface, my childhood was split. My parents split when I was 5. They had a very ugly 9-year divorce, all arguing over who would have custody over me. I had no siblings. My mother suffered from multiple mental health issues. She still has gone to I think she's battled demons her whole life. And because of that, I think I learned how to talk people off of cliffs. And so I think that was, and being able to read someone's emotional state quickly, was something that I think I was able to learn as a result of that. On the flip side, my father is a patriarchal Middle Eastern man. And so I have these very stark contrasts, like hot, cold water, as the majority of my childhood, or at least my formative years. And so I'd have a somewhat, for lack of a better term, batshit crazy mother. And that would be juxtaposed against a father with extraordinary amounts of discipline and order and structure to everything. Mm. And so, and what's interesting is I actually think I take more after my mother in terms of how I think. But I think the order that my dad created was positive. That being said, what he was able to create was a hole inside of me that I would never be able to fill with enough success, fame, ambition ever, because it would never be good enough. And now at this point, he continues to reiterate that he is proud of me and all those things. He wasn't a proponent of me quitting my very fancy job and going and starting a gym. I'll tell you that. Really, no one was. But that being said, now he's on the train. But after he told me that he was proud, which took years, I realized when he said it that I didn't care. And that made sense to me because I left without his consent, which means that at that point I'd actually made the decision that I didn't care about what he thought. And so although it is nice now, that was when the breaking point happened, is when I decided that his happiness was less important than mine. And so, the formative experiences, I'm sure the many things that many of us have had in traumatic childhoods, I experienced. But I think that ultimately those things were the things that gave me I'm going to go on a tangent, but I think it'll be worth it. So Dr. Kashi, who's my closest friend, he and I talk all the time about these types of things, but negative visualizations. And so if we can, and this is one of the strongest coping mechanisms that exists, and my father was actually the one who equipped me with it. And he said, there's nothing that anyone can do to you that will be worse than what you've already gone through. And he's like, just remember that. And so that became a kind of armor for me in terms of life, is that no matter what happened, I was like, this is better than what I've been through. This is not a huge deal. And so it allowed me to minimize some of the stressors in my life, or my perception of how stressful something was, as a result of that, which is why, I don't know, I think everything can be spun to positive. I mean, good to have a wholesome childhood. I think if you spin it the right way, it can also be great to have a horrible childhood. Just how you see it.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. The reason why I usually ask about people's childhoods, especially successful people, is because I have found consistently in successful people I have met in person or I've interviewed on the podcast that one of the very consistent things amongst each and every one of them is you can call it a traumatic childhood, but certainly a non-traditional or, a childhood where they suffered some kind of adversity. So children, if they don't suffer adversity in their early years, it can be obviously, it can go both ways. It can actually either make you very successful or it can make you go the other way and be a victim or and not make a success of your life. Certainly from my own childhood, and I guess I'm interested because I do a lot of personal work myself. And I know that a lot of the experiences that I had with very traumatic divorce, same as you, going to boarding school at a very young age, having to just figure shit out and realize that there ain't no one coming to save you. It made me extremely resilient. And I guess one of the struggles that I have is like I have 4 children. And, I remember reading this great quote once that said something like it was actually talking about a father, every successful father struggles to give his children the same struggles that he had that made him successful, because you want your children to, what it is that made you resilient and successful in that adversity, and you want to give your children as much adversity as possible, but also you have a lot of money. Like we have a private chef at home who cooks all our children's food and a housekeeper who brings them breakfast in bed. And I'm like, no, don't do it, So I guess that's why I'm interested. But what I want to know is how important, it sounds like you built a lot of you built a lot of self-belief as a child, which you talked about mindset being really important, and you built some really good postulates, really good positive postulates, which has helped you to be successful. How important is self-belief, do you feel, in the people that you work with and you train, in the gym owners that you work with, or even people you work with in general?
You probably know what the answer is. Very.
I know, but I kind of want you to break it down for my people.
Yeah. Um, Nothing can happen until, fundamentally, nothing in your reality, can happen. This is my belief, right? It can happen until it happens in your head, right? And to some degree, I don't see that as like I'm waking up every morning and just visualizing my life. And some people do that, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. But at the very least, some people on a subconscious level, when they sign up for a program, whether it's a weight loss program or whether it's a business coaching program or mentorship, they've already made the decision that it's not going to work, and they want to prove to themselves that yet another thing isn't going to work because they are a special snowflake, right? And so they don't want to lose that feeling of being a special snowflake, that it's not their fault, just the world is stacked against them. And so, relinquishing that belief is very hard for them. And so I think the most useful belief that I've had has been that if someone can, therefore I can too. And I think as soon as you have one person, and I'm sure like Elon Musk, for example, is like, no one has done it and I will be the first. And that's probably an even more useful belief set. But at the very least, most people who are listening to this, depending on where they're at, I think simply jumping from, well, that won't work for me, to if one person can, therefore I can too, if I duplicate the actions.
It's like Roger Bannister when he broke the 4-minute mile. Up until that point, people believed that it wasn't possible. And then within, 6 months, there were 16-year-old girls breaking the 4-minute mile. It's once the belief was built that it was possible, then that everybody started doing it. So much good stuff I want to ask you. Goal setting. So I think it's a good segue into goal setting. I have heard you say that you always had a goal bigger than just being on the gym floor. Whenever you first started your gyms, you had 6 gyms, wasn't that right?
Yeah.
And you never really just saw yourself as being on the gym floor. That was never the bigger goal for you. How important is goal setting in your life, even currently?
Very.
I walked right into that, didn't I? Like, ask me an intelligent question, Kim, please.
I would try and delineate this between, emotional goals and, like business goals, right? Or like something that's a tangible goal. So I want to get in this shape, or I want to do this competition, or I want to make this amount of money, whatever that is. Those ones I think are incredibly important, and reverse engineering what it looks like on an hourly or daily basis, right? And I walk through this exercise with virtually every business that I consult for. There's a couple of equations that are on my YouTube channel that actually one got posted today. It's called the pi equation, but it's basically probably the most used equation that I use for all projections that I do in business. And understanding that equation and how you can project inwards and outwards of where you can spot issues in the business That is what I do. That is my pulse, right? In terms of long term, I'm probably not as good as it at it as like Layla is. Layla's very good at this is the dream. I've just always wanted more. Mm-hmm. And it's been less concrete. Hers is like, I want to live in this place and have this type of life and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably been a deficiency of mine, is that I just want to grow almost at all costs. Mm-hmm. I just, I seek that out and sometimes it's to my own detriment because, like, for example, there's 4 businesses that we built to, multi figures or whatever, but I probably would have been better suited doing 1 to 9. Mm-hmm. Right. And it was because I thought to myself, this is new and challenging. I'm going to go try and figure this out so I can grow. When I think that for the ultimate goal, the outcome of having a bigger business that's more long lasting, et cetera, I should have stuck with that, or maybe even made a tiny pivot rather than chasing the challenge, chasing the optimal outcome, which is different. You know what I mean? In terms of process. And that's something that I'm currently working on.
Alex, I understand you on a level more than you could ever know, because honestly, I feel exactly the same way. Like I was, next year we were actually launching an apparel company and a supplement company. The Sculpted Vegan is growing like crazy. And I was like, going to launch my business company too. And and last night I was lying in bed, 1 a.m. I was texting Layla. Actually, she was like, what the fuck time is it with you? I was like, it's 1 a.m. I can't sleep. I'm lying here planning my business next year. And I made the decision today. I was like, I'm not going to do my business. I'm not going to do the business mentor program next year. I actually made the decision because I was like, my family sees so little of me as it is, and I'm the mother, right? Not that that means anything really, but the kids and the emotional connection with the mom is very important. And I made that decision, but I'm so like you. It's that driven compulsion, isn't it? It's like, people always say to me, what do you want? I'm like, I just want more. I wanted $1 million. Then I wanted multi-million. Now I want $1 billion. And it's just this absolute and utter, I can't even put words to it, this feeling of needing to have more, needing to be the best, needing to not even be the best, just needing to do things to the highest degree, or to the furthest you can possibly take it. Like, I see you get up at 4 a.m. every day, right? I built my business between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. I had 4 kids. I was homeschooling. It was the only time I had free. I got up at 4:30 every morning, coffee in hand, at the table, 4:45, and I worked until 7 a.m. when they woke up. It was the only time I had, so I fucking did it. So when people say to me, oh, I don't have the time, I'm like, fuck you, you have the time. Get up earlier, Stop making excuses. Do you feel the same way? Is it like what is it? What is the 4 a.m. for you? Can you break that down for us?
So I think so I do wake up really early. And I don't want to take full credit for being, an absolute savage. I think part of it is I wake up early. But that's also because I go to bed early. And I'm just a big believer that most entrepreneurs need quiet time. You need focused energy time for extended periods. And most of us are builders, right? Most of us like creating things. And creating things, if you look at compared to like Layla works very differently than I do. She has lots more tasks. She has a lot more meetings and culture and leadership and a lot of coaching that she does internally. I have almost none. Like, almost no one reports to me. I'm just like float around in my little bubble. And as a result of that, though, I think optimizing my day around being able to stay in my creative space, or my best space, as long as possible is kind of what I did. And so if I wake up at 4, I can work by 4:30. And from 4:30 until 10, I've already got 5.5 hours of work in, really, before I have any conversation with another human. And 3 days a week, I have nothing, not including weekends. So there's only 2 days a week that I have anything on my calendar whatsoever. It's not that I don't work. It's just that I'm not talking to people. And so some people, because I know my first billionaire friend that I met, he was like, oh my God, 4 a.m., that's just so early. And I was like, well, what do you do? He's like, I'm a night owl. And so I think you can do it different ways. Like, he puts his kids to bed, and then from 9 to 3 is when he gets his 6 hours in, and then he sleeps and he wakes up at 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more important that we have these quiet hours than the actual time of day. But I think for me, at least, at the end of the day, I'm cooked. And so that's just how I function. And so I think for many people, I don't see a lot of people doing really good things after 6 or 7. They're just Netflixing and doing other stuff. And so for me, even when I was in college, I never worked past 9 p.m. ever. And I would just always rather just wake up early and wake up fresh and then keep studying rather than try and pull an all-nighter. And so that's just how I work. I don't know if that's necessarily for everyone, but that's why I do it.
Yeah, no, because I remember you saying, in a previous interview that I had watched, you said, the first discipline people need to learn is how to control their own body. And I was like, I love this guy because it's what I teach constantly in the Sculpted Vegan. I'm like, literally, show up, do the work, have discipline, build your inner word. If you can't trust your inner word, truly, if you can't trust that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, you have nothing. If you don't have your inner word, you have nothing. Nothing. You need to build control, self-control, self-discipline. You need to show up when you say you're going to show up and get the work done. Do you teach that inside your program? Is that something that you think that others can learn later in life? Or do you have like strategies for, okay, hang on. I'm going to backpedal. I'm going to say, because I know I do want to go into the business a little bit and what it is that you do and what it is that you teach, because I want to give you a bit of PR as well. But I guess what I find in my business, and especially this is part of the reason why I've decided not to work with entrepreneurs next year specifically, is because what I see holds people back a lot is the emotional intelligence. I can give people strategies all fucking day, but let me tell you something. If you don't have the emotional strength to do what you know you should do, you're falling at the first hurdle. You're never going to get past it. And do you find that in your business? Do you find that it's a hurdle, like people lacking discipline and courage and emotional knowledge stops them from, and if yes, how do you help them get over that?
So yes,
do you just give them
I think the way to advance people is to break their beliefs. And the belief breaking process, the good news about that for anyone who's listening is that is very well documented. And so the belief breaking process typically revolves around stories that you can tell that rewrites or overwrites someone's existing belief set. And so if we can choreograph an experience that is going to get someone to be able to rewrite their internal story, then they will have a quote breakthrough. And then after that point, their lens on the world will change around this specific topic. And so I'm a big believer that selling properly, not only just on the initial sale, but continuously throughout, is key to getting people to be successful, independent of what type of coaching you do, right? And so I think constantly every single implementation or intervention that, like for example, if I was going to, so I actually did a sleep challenge in our community, right? And for anyone who's listening, I heard a mentor once say, if you can't control what time you go to bed and wake up every day, how do you expect to accomplish anything? Great. How do you expect to accomplish anything great? Like you can't even control what time you go to bed and what time you wake up. I had somebody message me yesterday and they said, how do you wake up so early? I said, I set an alarm. How do you get out of bed? How do you not snooze the alarm? I just don't. I just don't really, it's not like, and I don't even think about that as like, that hasn't even been a choice. I couldn't even really comprehend the question because it's just like, it's time to get up. And it's also because I probably look forward to what I'm doing. So I'm excited to start working. Right. But the sleep challenge that I did, I had to frame it. The first 45 minutes of the presentation was breaking beliefs around why they couldn't do it and why that belief is false. Before I said, this is what we're going to be doing. It's your action steps. I think too often, a lot of the content that exists is just like, here's 5 steps to increase your sleeping, right? But people are like, neat. And then they just go about the day. But if I tell you before we start that I start with, do you know the decisions that you make are going to 100% dictate how your life goes? Is 100% based on the decisions. Underneath of that, how do you think you can directly impact how the quality of your decisions? Let me tell you a story. So when I was in college, I had this really complex math problem that I had to solve. And I was staring at this thing for 2 hours. And I was like, I tried every way. I was like, I cannot figure this thing out. And then I went to bed and I woke up and I looked at the problem and I solved it in 5 minutes. And it was because I had fresh eyes and I was well rested. And so many of us could immediately impact the well-being in our lives, our ability to solve problems, our ability to handle stress, our ability to be good husbands, our testosterone levels, the amount of fat that we have, all of these things as a result of one habit, which instead of telling people when to wake up, I tell them when to go to bed. Because waking up, you'll be exhausted. But if I can get you to go to bed at the same time, you will eventually wake up after full night's sleep just early. You're like, you must not sleep much. I was like, I go to bed at 8:30. I wake up at 4:30. It's 8 hours of sleep. I mean, I don't know why that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's fine. And sometimes I wake up at 3:30 because I wake after 7 hours. Like, it's okay. So anyways, to respond to your question, yes, I do think that it's the biggest issue. The way to solve it, I think, is telling stories that break beliefs. And then on top of that, putting it in a community where people start in cohorts, where someone starts at the same time as someone else, and they can see someone else be successful. And then immediately they think, well, shoot, this guy started at the same time as me. Because it's something different to see someone in the past who's been successful. But if someone starts at the same time as you, I'm sure you have entrepreneurs who were in groups of yours, or you started in the journey at the same time. And if you saw one of them move faster or bigger, and you probably can remember some time, you had this draw where all of a sudden you had envy, which I think is a healthy emotion, contrary to what everyone thinks. You had this envy of, I want what they have. And I think if you can do that, you can pull people out of the hole of inaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe so. And I think as well, it comes down to being at cause, understanding yourself well enough. I've heard you talk about that as well. You see, I did do my research on you, which actually is very unlike me, I have to be honest. But like I said, whenever I started watching you, I was like, shit, this guy's the smartest person I know. So I'm going to come up with some really fucking intelligent questions. And I think I'm failing miserably here, but it is what it is. So I don't really care. You're like, ask me some strategy, or let me like tell you how brilliant I am. Stop asking me why I get up so early. But I'm always interested, I guess, in what makes people tick, and I've heard you talk a lot about, culture and management, and about not being unethical and people being focused on creating value. And these are very, very these are not values that everybody has, Alex. If people do not understand they don't understand their own emotional state. First of all, they don't really understand how they interact with the world and their responsibility in it. And it takes and when you truly are at cause, you understand your emotions, you understand how you affect other people and the world, and then you can take that into a macro scale. You can suddenly broaden your view, and you can start to work towards something which is a little bit bigger than what you currently have. And I know that you do a lot of philanthropy work, or that you actually dedicate a lot of your free time to, equal access in education and underprivileged communities. What is the driver behind that? What's the driver behind that for you?
Well, I believe in entrepreneurship, and I think it's the only thing that is, a source of positive change in the world. I don't think the government's going to save us. So because of that, information is, I think, the only thing that can set people free, and learning skills. And so the good thing is that the entire school system is woefully inadequate, pretty much in every country, especially when it comes to teaching entrepreneurship. And that personality type in general. And I don't think it's necessarily, I'm not nature versus nurture on that. I think some people, like, there's so many different flavors of entrepreneurs that I've met, I'm sure like you have, that really anyone can do it if they choose to. Right. But I think the information that's out there is really not well organized. And if I can cut through that and give people a way to find out how they can fish for themselves, that's something that's very fulfilling for me. I had a teacher who stayed with me after school when I was 15 years old, and he worked out with me 2 hours a day. Because of that, and I remember when he called me out, he saw me in the hallway. He was like, "Hey, boy," and I was like, I went to an all-guys school. So I was like, what? And he's like, "You lift weights?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "You want to?" And I was like, "I don't know how." And he said, "Come with me after school. I'll show you." And so he worked out with me, for 2 hours a day, and he never charged me anything and never asked for anything. In retrospect, it was kind of almost weird if you think about it.
Wonderful.
But he did that for a year, and he ended up getting fired for spending too much time with kids after school. Weird. But as a result of one guy basically just really over investing in me for no actual reason besides his own fulfillment or whatever, that set me on a course of, personal development. And maybe I would have continued, maybe would have found a different teacher at a different time. It's very possible. But as far as I'm concerned, this is what happened. And so if I can help facilitate that for other people, then I will do that. I do think that a lot of us, as much as, I think at different seasons in my life, if you'd ask me questions, I'd have different answers. But I remember I used to get really angry when I would see billionaires say, like, "I'm just lucky," because I was like, that's such horseshit. Of course you're not lucky. But I feel like the further along I've gotten, I do feel like there is a lot more luck to it than when I was kind of earlier on, because I was like, you just got to get punched in the face. You got to keep fucking going, do the boring work. And like that, we still espouse those values, because also the people in my community are at a different point. But when I look at the macro scale of, like, some people are just not born with a high IQ.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are born in such traumatic experiences, and some people might have a genetic predisposition to not being able to handle stressors in a certain way. And that childhood I had, maybe with a different gene set, would have just been traumatic and just crippled me, which is entirely possible. And so when you said earlier, I find that a lot of hyper successful people had traumatic childhoods. I think a lot of people have traumatic childhoods, and a certain percentage of people become successful. Mm-hmm. That's just my belief. If you look at the Bulgarian, so to bring this as a fitness example, the Bulgarian weightlifting method, they basically took the entire country and just put everyone in an unbelievably high volume method that pretty much breaks everyone. But if you do not break, you become a champion. And I think life is far more similar to that. And then we say, Johnny, how is it that you can handle so much volume, right? And he's like, well, I mean, I work out 3 times a day. And people are like, man, this guy, just unbelievable. But it's like, I think a lot of people are just fucked, for lack of a better term. And so I think because of that, I think to whom much is given, much is expected. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I've been given a lot in many ways. I was born in the United States. Automatically, I'm, 300 million out of 8 billion or whatever number it is now, right? I'm already in the top, whatever, just for being born in the United States. Besides that, I didn't have financial hardships growing up. If I didn't have to worry about food, basic thing, I didn't have to worry about that. Now another X% above that. And so like, if I look at the amount of things that happen to me, there's so many things that were in my direction. Now, sure, I absolutely did have to work hard. I absolutely did need to be able to handle failure and getting punched in the face and getting rejected. And I did have to study and work at skills and work on my own confidence, my own beliefs, and the inner word, like you said, keeping my own promises to myself. Mm-hmm. But still, I think that the overarching thing is that one statement is, to whom much is given and much is expected. And so if I can give back even a percentage of what I've been given through the world, the universe, luck, I will.
Do you think it's, you see, I have never really, I suppose, considered it as being luck, and a lot, I guess, to do with opportunity as well. Like I'm a risk taker. I see opportunities and I see them and I act on instinct and I take them and I move fast when I see an opportunity. And I'm willing to take that risk because I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to, like, if it all, and I did a training last week in my business group, and I said to them, guys, here's the thing. I said, I see everything as an experiment and everything is a bit of fun, because if it all went away tomorrow and I had to move with my husband and kids into a council house, I don't know whether you have those over here, over in America, whatever you would call them, like a state-owned, tiny little house, and work in McDonald's, I would, and I would claw my way back up again. So I'm not afraid to lose what I have, because, so then everything just becomes an experiment. And so luck, I guess, I'm trying on what you said. I think, yes, we are definitely fortunate to, I didn't struggle financially, even though I had a traumatic childhood. I went to a private boarding school, for fuck's sake. I had a great education, where was my mother there to kiss me whenever I fell and hurt myself? No, but like, I had a pretty good childhood as well. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity. But I think that a lot of people are presented with opportunities, but I do believe that seeing those opportunities and taking them is a massive part of your success. Like you basically roped your wife into going into business with you on the first date. I mean, tell us about that. Tell us about Layla and your relationship, because we have a lot of female listeners here, obviously, and they did hear Layla last week, and oh my God, the feedback I got was amazing. So now they're happy to hear the other side of it.
She's the best. Can I have one caveat to the last thing before we close the loop on that?
100%.
So when it comes to luck, and I don't want to anger the on the way entrepreneurs that are like, of course you're not fucking lucky, you worked really hard. I think the wrinkle to that is that it doesn't matter who you are, you don't know what cards you were dealt. Mm-hmm. And so the actions still remain the same. And so whether or not, it's like saying you've got, I'll give a better analogy to make sense of it, in a fitness analogy, because it's easy for me. If you have really good genetics for weightlifting versus not having good genetics for weightlifting, your genetics will matter. But you also have no idea what your genetics are until you start lifting. Mm. And the only way to become a champion either way is by lifting a lot and doing it over and over again for a long period of time. And so, and the additional corollary to that is that anybody who has talent compared to someone who has work ethic, they've already proven this a zillion times. The outcome of somebody who works, let's say, an hour a day on working on their piano skills versus somebody who's naturally has an ear for music, if you compare those two people in a year, the person who worked is already better. You compare those people in 10 years and you only hear about how that 10-year person has so much natural talent. Mm-hmm. And so I had, when I was growing up, very bad beliefs about my genetics with lifting. I didn't think I had good genetics. I thought I had skinny guy genetics. I was like, I can't get bigger, and that's okay. I was like, I had accepted that. And then at one point, just like the math, I was like, what if I have freak genetics? What if I'm a mutant? What if every time I touch the weight, I grow? And all of a sudden I started believing that and choosing to act as though that was my genetic belief set. And I added another 30 pounds to my frame. And it happened over another 5 years after I had plateaued. I'd already been competing at that point. So it wasn't like I was a new trainee. I'd already been training for almost a decade at that point. And so a decade into my training, I had what most people would consider a finished body, right? But then I still was able to add another 30 pounds because that was a belief. And so as much as I say now, there is a component of luck, I think there is. But in no way is it useful for you to think about it because it doesn't concern you because the cards were already dealt. So you just have to play them.
Yeah. And you won't even
So anyway, I just wanted to just
love it.
Wrap that last piece in.
It's perfect. And you won't even know, as you say, what you're capable of unless you actually do it, unless you actually start working towards it. You know, you've only got a hypothesis in the beginning, but you have to test that hypothesis with data and then see, does it actually.
I had a girl who asked me about her job. And she said, I don't know if this career is going to be useful for me. I want to make more money. And I was like, have you considered selling? And she said, well, I'm not good at sales. And I said, well, how many hours of sales training have you gone through? She's like, well, none. I was like, well, then why would it be reasonable for you to be good at sales? You've never even done it. You've never even practiced it. Why would you be good? She's like, well, I haven't really thought about it like that. I was like, of course you're fucking horrible. Why would you be good? Right. And so I think of a lot of people, like what I would give to newer entrepreneurs is do enough work that it would be unreasonable for you to suck. It would be unreasonable. If you do, for example, like one of the big, for anybody who's in business, I say it's called a rule of 100. That's what I call it. So you either do 100 reach outs a day or you spend $100 a day on advertising and you do that every day until you make money. And I guarantee you, if you do that rule of 100 every day for a year, you will not know what to do with the amount of business. The problem is you now know what to do. Why aren't you fucking doing it? Because of the emotional shit that Kim was talking about earlier. So anyway, and then you got to figure that out. Right. Yeah. But the tactics are easy. It's the doing them that's hard.
Yeah. But you see, that's the most frustrating thing for me whenever, and I love what you're saying. And I guess that, you know, we do see it in bodybuilding a lot because, you know, we sold 30,000 programs this year. And so out of the 30,000 programs that we sold, we probably had 10% of people who actually followed through and got the results. You see, my 18-month program, okay, I developed a program which is an 18-month sculpt and shred. They build for 12 months and then they sculpt their body for 6 months. And we sold, I think in the first year, we sold maybe 1,200 of those, right? 1,200 programs. And someone said to me, oh my God, your 18-month program, it's so amazing. Like, have you got some incredible transformations? I said, no. And they were like, why not? And I said, because do you want to know how many people have finished the 18-month program? This was after like 24 months or something. Do you want to know how many people have finished it? And they were like, how many? I was like, 2. They were like, 2? I was like, 2 people have actually finished the program. Don't get me wrong. Loads of people are 12 months in. Loads of people got to 9 months, had to take a break. Loads of people got halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, a quarter of the way through. They're almost in. There were 2 people who actually shredded to athlete style, you know, bodies and did photo shoots and looked like a stage athlete at the end of it. Now we have many, many, many more now because we're 3 years down the line. But it's like the same as the 4-week shred. We ran a competition. We had 3,000 people join the 4-week shred, and we had 202 people or something enter out of 3,000 actually enter the competition. They actually finished. It's shocking. People just don't finish. And you're right. It's the emotional component is the missing component. And I guess this is the bit that this is where I'm feeling frustrated at the minute with the amount of people that I have on my network. And I'm sure you find it as well. You know, do you not get frustrated, Alex? Do you not get like, you just want to shake them and go, just do the fucking work? Or are you much more forgiving than me and understanding?
I think it's taken some time to get through that for me, because there was definitely a long period of time where I used up a lot of my emotional energy trying to, it's the difference between being a savior and being a guide. And I think that ultimately, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I can really lead you like in the Matrix, I can bring you to the door, but you have to walk through it. And so I think it's being able to think like that, I think has helped me honestly gain a little bit of emotional distance, which I think, especially for you, you know, you have so much reach and you have so many people that I think it's required in order to maintain your mental sanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's true. Oh my God, I can't believe we've been talking for nearly an hour. And I do really want to know, because I love her so much, I do want to know about your wife. I want you to talk about her. I want to hear all your projections. about her, to be honest. So I was so interested to meet you just because she is like one of my favorite people now after such a short space of time. And I was very curious to meet you, to find out were you just as fabulous, and you are. But you literally met her online, and
Yeah.
then you were like, let's go into business together on your first date. And
Yeah.
how long after till you got married?
I think 11 months.
Oh wow, so quick. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but one of the funnier parts of the story was, we got married, but I asked her to marry me 7 days or 8 days or six. It was either 6, 7, or 8 days before we got married. So we never really got engaged. I just said, hey, I think we should get married. That was my actual proposal. I said, I've been thinking about it. I think it makes too much sense for us not to be married. That was my actual proposal.
You're so romantic.
And then I just said, like, do you agree? That was my proposal. And she was like, I agree. And I was like, okay, well, I guess you need to get a ring then. And she was like, yeah. And so we got in the car and went to the store, bought a ring, came back 45 minutes later. And I was like, what else do we need to do? I guess we should go get a church. So I called the local church up and I was like, hey, are you guys free on Wednesday night? I said, okay, sure. And I said, can you just stay after the sermon? We'll see you in the back. I said, okay. And then we went and we got married at the end. We didn't have either of our parents there. We didn't tell anyone. We had one pair of two friends who were there who were local. And we called our parents later to tell them that we were like, hey, we got engaged. And they're like, that's amazing. And we're like, and we got married.
I love it. Do you not find that many women are just too fucking emotional? They're just like, I want the fairy tale and the big wedding. And I just find women in general frustrate me, which I think, and listen to all the women listening to this, I love you all, but I have a no BS attitude. It's one thing people always say about me. I'm always going to tell it like it is. And I love women, and there's nothing wrong with wanting the white horse and the knight and the shining armor and the sword and the big white dress and the fairy tale wedding. It's just not something that I wanted. But I think that women in general are too fucking hung up on the fairy tale, which then comes crashing down, and the reality is very, very different. And I love the story I love that story. And do you believe in soulmates? Do you believe in meant to be, or
No.
you met her, you were like, you're my kind of girl, let's do it?
I think you need aligned mission and aligned values. And I think,
oh my God, I agree.
this is all right. I feel very passionate about this. So I think most people do a horrible job picking their mates.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if people looked at them as life partners, they would do much better. And at least in my experience, and this is, I'm telling you right now, 99% of people are not doing this, and I'm not saying that you made the wrong call. I'll give you my perspective. I had many, many relationships, as did Layla, before we met each other, that were very explosive, romance, emotion, ups and downs, and crazy chemistry and all that stuff. And we had all that. And when Layla and I met on our first date that lasted 4 hours, we didn't have any romantic connection whatsoever. In fact, on our second date, Layla was like, I don't really get any sexual vibes from you. And then I just belly laughed, right? Because I'd never heard that from a single woman in my entire life. And, but I'm telling this story to illustrate the point, which is like, we were just like, she was interested in me, mm-hmm. and I found her interesting. Mm-hmm. We had really similar views. We had very similar upbringing. So I had a Middle Eastern father, white crazy mother. She had a Middle Eastern father, white crazy mother. We both left where we were to go to California to pursue fitness at the same age, at the same time. We both swiped right, you know what I mean? And we both followed a very similar path. And so as a result of that, we both wanted similar things out of life, and we wanted to get there, which is the values, in a similar way. And so I think, and all the research that we did, you look at like arranged marriages, right? The success rate or the divorce rate in arranged marriage is significantly lower than voluntary marriages. Now you can make arguments of like there's parental pressures and other things like that, but it's an overwhelming percentage more. And I've met multiple people who are in arranged marriages who are from India, because my stepmother is Indian, and have phenomenal marriages. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes from low expectations, high commitment. Mm-hmm. And everyone in culture has the reverse, which is 100% expectation, zero commitment. And they also want the other person to satisfy every human need they have, which is impossible. And so if we could approach this, I think it's just as a collective, if everyone approached their mate as, this is where I want to go, this is how we'd like to get there, would you like to go on this journey with me? And we will learn to love each other along the way. I would say, like, right now I love Layla more than I did. And I feel like people say that, but like we didn't like each other that much. And when we got married, we were not in love. So that's why that proposal was that way, is because like I didn't have like any horse and fairy thoughts, because I was like, this makes sense. Let's come to an agreement. Do you feel like this exchange is valuable for both of us? And do you think that we could both become more valuable assets together? And she agreed. And so that was kind of the foundation of our relationship. But by doing that, our relationship has been founded a lot on rational thinking. And so, because of that, we have very low volatility in our relationship. We've been in one fight, and it's like a fight, where it was literally us disagreeing on what to do with the direction of one of the companies. Like that was the fight. And it was over within 30 minutes. And it wasn't yelling. It was just like, I strongly disagree with this position. I don't see how this aligns with our mission. Right. And so but the thing is when we have these things that we can compare it to, this is what we said our mission was, this is what we said our values are, then we have this third party that we can compare based on our original agreement of how we were going to enter this relationship, how we're going to be husband and wife together. And so we have learned to love one another because we are similar. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of the chemistry comes from friction, right? Become totally being opposite to one another. You're like, I just hate you, but I love it, right? There's that feeling. But that's a feeling. And then you realize 6 months later, you're like, I actually just fucking hate you, right? Right? Like you actually believe everything that's opposite to what I believe, and you don't want to do in life what I want to do, and you don't want to get there the way I want to get there. And then people just are in these relationships that they're stuck, and then they make the commitment because they're like, I guess that's what I should do now. And then they just don't know what to do. I'm not saying you can't salvage a marriage, but I think there needs to be a new agreement that has to be entered of like, this is what we would like to do. And if the thing is they're not aligned, I'm not pro-divorce because I am pro-high commitment. But unless you can come to an agreement of what you want life to look like, then you're literally going to be both going in other directions. So I could talk to you more about relationships.
No, it's wonderful. I love hearing. You have to know when to quit. I think that's the thing about divorce. I am pro commitment as well, but you also have to know when to quit. You have to know when it's not working. Ryan and I are the same. We met actually, ours was slightly different. We met on a Friday. We met on a Tuesday. We went for lunch on the Saturday. I went for dinner at his house on the Friday, and I was pregnant 2 weeks later. So we celebrated 11 months together with an 8-week-old baby and a mortgage. So not even joking. It was like so fast. And then we had 4 kids in 5 years. So it happened really quickly. But you're right about the core values. It's so important. But I think though that what you have that many people lack, especially men, and I don't want to be hard on males, but generally men are not as emotionally aware as you are. Men exist, I find, very much on the thought realm, and women are much more in the emotional realm. And so I think that because you're so self-aware and because you evaluate and because you're very process-oriented, you're able to evaluate not from an unemotional state, but from an unemotional state, and actually see, and are your core values the same? But that comes from knowing yourself as well, Alex, knowing yourself. Well, many people just don't know themselves as well as you know yourself.
I just want to add a piece of color to this that might provide value. I think a lot of people don't know what words mean. And what I mean by that is a lot of people don't know how to name emotions. Mm-hmm. And so, especially men, but I mean, I think it goes both ways. But like, for example, I'm frustrated. Well, that could mean a lot of things, right? It could be, I feel like an injustice was done to me. It could feel like I am disrespected. I could feel I could feel embarrassed. I could feel shame over something that I did. I could feel envy. I could feel jealousy. Do people know the difference between envy and jealousy? They are different. Mm-hmm. And if you can name the emotion, I think a lot of times just literally naming it gives you control over it, and then it stops controlling you. And then you can assess, is the reason that I'm feeling this emotion justified? And then all of a sudden, you can pull outside of yourself and look at it. And I think if people just spent time on learning the words and what it means, then they would probably have a lot easier time managing through life.
Yeah, I agree. And also what I would love to put on this is like this, we could have gone this podcast, and I'm going to let you go soon, I promise. But we could have, I could have gone with this podcast in drawing on all of your expertise and building companies and doing all that, which is kind of what I've heard you speak a lot of. But I guess what I always try and teach, and what I really wanted to see, could I find in you, which I knew would be there, of course, is, what you're talking about effectively is becoming, as you say, being able to label an emotion And being able to label an emotion, be able to talk about it, being able to separate yourself from what you're feeling and then being able to identify that and then have a conversation around that, that is actually effectively sales, right? That's knowing how to sell yourself. Like my husband and I were having this chat the other day. It was something about money. He was getting a chunk of money from his company and he wanted to put it into pension. And I said, well, actually, I prefer that money to go here. And he was like, no. Well, hang on. We agreed that such and such. And I said, but why? And we started to get into a bit of a right wrong about it. And I was like, hang on, stop. I said, let's pull back. I said, we're talking about different things. I said, let me explain to you why I'm feeling this way. I feel I've worked really hard all year and I'm feeling exhausted. I need the break. And so I was able to say, emotionally, I actually want to feel supported by you emotionally with this money. And he was like, oh, okay, well, that makes total sense. For me, that doesn't make sense to me, because for me, the sense and saving the tax, whatever, we were talking about two completely different things. I was saying, will you support me emotionally? And he was saying, I just want to make financial sense. So we weren't even talking about the same thing, but because we were able to go out of content and into process and actually realize where we were discussing, I heard what he wanted, he heard what I wanted, and we came to a decision like that. But having the ability to do that is, not many people have it. But when you have it, Alex, and this is where I want to take it back into business, then I just want you to tell us quickly before we go about gym launch. But this is having, you're like so quick, there's so much we could talk about. Having that ability makes you a good salesperson. It makes you a good business person. It makes you someone who shows up in the gym, who can identify your process, identify your limitations, can overcome them and make better decisions. Simply being aware of you, your emotions, your physical body, your emotional body, and how that affects the world, your place in the world, is simply life-changing. And that, I think, is what separates an entrepreneur from, or someone like you, like a highly, highly successful entrepreneur, from a regular person. I believe that it actually all starts with us. And once you figure that shit out, everything else flows. Your relationships, your kids, if you have them, your work life, your bodybuilding, your goal setting, your nutrition. You have to figure yourself out first. Would you agree? You're
Yes.
like, yes. Yes, Kim. I agree. I concur. Alex, so much good stuff here. Before we go, I want you to give a shout out, because we have a lot of gym owners listening to this. And I was, and I know you don't just have Gym Launch, you have several companies, Prestige Labs and Alan, is that?
Yep.
Ask Alan?
Yep.
So, but I was telling my own trainer, Mark Getty, about you and Layla whenever I first met you. I was telling about Layla, and he was like, and he owns a gym, and he was like, what is it they do? And what's this about gyms? And who's this? And he was like, he wasn't interested in you at all. He just wanted to hear about Gym Launch. So because we do have, honestly, I'm not even joking, because we do have a lot of personal trainers and gym owners and different things, who listen to this podcast. Tell us a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about what you do. Give it a shout out.
So for gyms specifically, we help them solve three main problems. The first is that they can't acquire customers profitably. And so what that means is they have a budget on marketing. Some of them don't even have a budget, but they try and spend. And once they spend it, that means it's gone. If you can market and acquire customers properly, the right way, then you can have a negative acquisition cost, which is just fancy speak for making more money getting a customer than it costs you to get them. Which means if I were to spend spend $100 on advertising, then a customer would come preloaded with $400 in their pocket. And then I could take $100 to cover the cost of them, take another $100 to get another customer, and still have $200 to go put in my pocket. And by doing that, I can continue to spend. And so what that does is it allows somebody who's capital constrained, aka does not have a lot of money, to be able to acquire customers ad infinitum, basically as many as they want. And what that does is it removes the bottleneck of getting new customers as a problem for the facility, which then introduces the second problem, which is that once they remove the bottleneck of acquisition of their facility, they realize that they're at full capacity and yet their bank account is empty, because they do not have a good pricing model and their fulfillment model is broken. And so we help them price package their services in a way that will maximize the profit of the facility and ultimately make them much more durable. The third piece is that once you have customers that you're acquiring profitably and you are making good money on them because you're priced appropriately, people leave. Retention, churn happens. And so what are the processes that are repeatable, that are not personality driven, meaning you don't have to be the one doing it, that drive people to pay and stay in the long term, right? And so we've identified from the process that I laid out in the very beginning what the top 1% of gym owners do for each of those things, and we've duplicated those things across thousands of gyms now, so we know that the processes work. And so fundamentally, that is what we do with gyms. And so we have, when someone comes on, the first thing we do is we generate cash flow immediately from free traffic sources, and that gives them usually a $10,000 to $20,000 injection. From there, we then do what we call an internal play, which is then we add retail products to their services, which is Prestige Labs, our supplement company, which we formulated just for gyms. So they're price protected against Amazon and all that stuff, and it provides them more margin and commissions than any other company. So we actually just crossed $10 million paid out. So I've paid $10 million in commissions to the gym community, which is kind of cool. Just to show you that the sales process works. We paid out $10 million in commissions to this. And so the next thing we do is we basically add more value to the clients without adding more sessions, right? We solve another problem for our clients without needing more square footage. And so that becomes another revenue and profit driver for the facility. And then after that, now they have cash flow. They have a second revenue stream that didn't require any overhead. Then we take that cash and we invest in growth. And that's the process that I did with gyms. And I did 33 gym turnarounds before I started packaging up that process. So it was me flying out and doing this in person. And so we know the process and what it looks like. And so we just take gyms through that. We've done 4,000 in the last 4 years. I can say with a lot of confidence, I don't think anyone's close to us. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm just saying as a matter of fact. The fact that we're 10 times bigger than anyone else in the space, and I know the other guys in the space, I help them because I'd rather them just do a good job. And most of them just reduplicate our content, which is fine. And honestly, I'm at a point where I don't care. I'd rather just have gyms make money.
Yeah.
And so that is what we do.
I love it. And it's gymlaunch.com. That's where they can, and if someone wants to find out more about it, they can go to gymlaunch.com and they can actually apply.
I'll give a different URL.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we don't have it in the show notes, so just shout it out.
Okay, perfect. So if you like this type of stuff, if you're a podcast person, go to alexspodcast.com, and it'll reroute you to all of the stuff that we do in terms of, and ours are really short, 10 minutes or so of like, here's how you downsell. Here's how you do an assumed close. They're very tactical. The other thing you can do is you can go to alexsbook.com, and that'll route you to our book. It's free. You can cover it. Shipping handles $9. And it's everything that we've learned from 3,500 plus facilities at the time when I wrote it, of turnarounds, everything from acquisition all the way to managing and what ads to hire for salespeople. Everything is in that book. You can use it on your own. And yeah, my gift to you.
I love it. I'm going to go and check it out myself. Actually, I might get a few tips for growing my business next year. Alex Hormozi, this was absolutely awesome. I apologize for keeping you so long, but dear God, this was so much fun. And I could have talked to you for another 30 minutes at least, but I'm not going to bend your ear any longer. I'm Irish, you see, because we love just to have a good old chin wag. A chin wag, that's what it's called, a good old chin wag. I say things like this and people are like, I don't even understand what that means. But anyway, it's Irish for a good old chat. Alex, where else can we find you? On Instagram as well?
Yeah, at Hormozi, just my last name.
Hormozi. And Layla actually as well introduced me to the lovely JP Sears recently. He's come on the podcast in January, and I saw he tagged you this morning. Actually, you and he are friends.
Yeah, we're homies.
He's a good guy, I like him. And I was dying to find out your views about governments and schooling and coronavirus and all that. But you know what? We got into all the emotional stuff. Maybe we'll have to do another one and I can let you loose, because I have a lot of very strong views on those things too, let me tell you, which I'm not afraid to talk about. Alex, thank you so much for being here. We'll list everything that Alex talked about in the show notes, guys, and you can go and check out his podcast and check out his book and get loads and loads of free information. And Alex, I will catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, wasn't he just a diamond? Wasn't he like a gem in here? Tell you what, he's not bad to look at either. Wouldn't kick him out of bed if he farted. No, but truly, like that's a terrible sexist thing to say. But let me tell you, a man with brains and beauty and buff, like you should see this guy's biceps. I'm telling you, has the whole package. So ripped and rich. So while I'm over here like fanning myself after interviewing Mr. Hormozi, guys, just want to say I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed it. It was fantastic. We're definitely going to have Alex and Layla back on the podcast. Might even have them back on the podcast together. Here might try and persuade Ryan to come here and we'll do some kind of like relationship podcast. Wouldn't that be fun? Sure, Alex is maybe listening to this going, no, that is never going to happen, just so you know. But anyway, guys, listen, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave me a review in the podcast. If you want to win a Sculpted Vegan program, all you got to do is leave a review, send me a screenshot on Instagram. You could be in with a chance of winning one of our programs, any program of your choice. And otherwise, I will chat to you next week for another episode of the Kim Constable podcast. Hope you have an awesome rest of the week wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.